So if you've been following this channel for a while, you may remember a series of videos that I did back in around 2016 or so called Write with Ryan Hall Writes. In those videos, I take you through some certain steps that you can follow in order to be a better writer, in order to be a better storyteller. I have learned a lot since 2016 about writing, about storytelling, but primarily around what it means to be an editor, because being an editor is a role that I have taken on in the past few years as part of Royal Hearts Media. So I'm going to offer 5 ways that you can improve your writing that allows you to write just a little bit more like an editor would. Now, the first step is really just pay attention to detail. Now, what I mean by that is, do the characters have continuity? Is your character 40 years old in one scene and 44 years old in the following scene, but you don't show the advancing 4 years? You don't let the reader know that it's 4 years in advance. Does the plot have continuity? Does it make sense? Could a reader be able to pick up the plot and be able to follow it without you having to do a whole bunch of exposition? So the first step is to pay attention to detail. Now, my next step is one that I personally enjoy a great deal, and that is research. Now, this is where your story, this is where your fictional story can go from something kind of bland to something truly magical, because it takes you into it takes you into the world. And an example I want to use, I've got 2 examples here. But the first example is, if your character goes to a bar, let's say. If your character goes to a bar and orders a shot of whiskey, this opens up a lot of questions. First of all, what kind of whiskey? Are we talking Jack Daniels? Are we talking Maker's Mark? Are we talking Four Roses? Or are we talking Jameson or Glenfiddich or Lagavulin? Do they like it neat? Do they like it on the rock? It's the details like this that help the reader really connect with that character. And another example, when I was working on Hello Again, when I was researching the character of Jimmy Holiday, one of the things that I did the most, other than listening to a ton of incredible music, was to research the types of guitars a player like Jimmy Holiday might play. And I settled on an old beat-up 1959 Gibson Les Paul. Now, if you know anything about guitars, you know that guitar, that particular like 57 through about 1960 is kind of the holy grail of the Les Paul guitar. And some of those guitars have been known to go for upwards of 6 figures in guitar auctions. My character just happened to have found it in a pawn shop in 1971 for $300. Really made the character of Annie, Jimmy's guitar, it really made that character come to life, I believe, and almost become an extension of the human character. Do your research. You don't have to put in every aspect, every little tidbit and whatnot. You don't have to put all of that stuff in there, but you do need to give them the detail that really helps to bring those characters to life. The next step is really be mindful of not just your voice as a writer, but your voice in the voice of your characters. How do your characters speak? What level of education might your character have? What, where might they be from? What do they do for a living? And I think a great example is one that I want to take, is two actually that I want to take from the iconic TV show The Sopranos. Now, the first character is the character of John Sacramone, or Johnny Sack, as everybody called him. Now, Johnny Sack was a cold, calculating, deliberate sort of man. And he spoke with that confidence. He spoke with that level of sophistication that other characters on that show might not have practiced. Paulie Walnuts is the perfect example of that. See, Paulie Walnuts was a lot more hot-headed. He was a lot more impulsive. And he was also a lot weirder. If you remember some of the scenes where he's talking about shoelaces, you may remember that. Paulie Walnuts, he didn't speak with that kind of sophistication that Johnny Sack spoke with. But you knew that Paulie was willing to go out and crack some skulls and worse for the cause. So pay super close attention to how your characters speak. Now, my fourth invitation, I want to give you guys a quick story. In my, I believe it was 11th grade government and economics class at Central High School in Tuscaloosa, we had this teacher named Coach Milligan. He was called that because he was also one of the football coaches. But Coach Milligan, I remember he assigned us a paper one time. This was back in the mid-90s, so political correctness, especially in the classroom, wasn't quite what it is today. But somebody asked him how long the paper needed to be. And then Coach Milligan says, apply the skirt rule. Long enough to cover the subject, but short enough to be interesting. But if you're anything like me as a writer, you have a tendency to over-edit before you write. It's always better to write long and cut out the fat before you publish than write short but leave the reader wanting more. I'll give you a great example that my editor shared with me. When Elizabeth read the manuscript for Hello Again, one of the places she said it felt a little bit hollow was there was a scene on Jimmy Holiday's back porch where he brings out a guitar for the first time since his cancer treatment. And there was a line that, when I was on the phone with her, there was a line that just hit me like a bag of rocks. And I don't remember the exact line, but it's the scene, I just want to make music with my brothers again. That entire scene was suggested by my editor, and I believe it really worked. I believe it really worked because my character's motivation in that particular scene might have been a little bit hollow. I believe that piece really worked. I believe that new piece really worked. Remember that it's always better to write your story long and cut out the fat in the editing and the publication process rather than write short and leave the reader wanting more. My last invitation to you is simply this. Never dumb your writing or storytelling down just because you think the reader might not understand. This is one that I'm incredibly passionate about because many of my favorite storytellers, many of my favorite writers are very sophisticated storytellers. Aaron Sorkin is a prime example of this. Aaron Sorkin, who won like 9 million Emmys when he was the writer on The West Wing, he wrote the You Can't Handle the Truth scene from A Few Good Men. Now, if that's not on the Mount Rushmore of movie quotes, then there doesn't need to be a Mount Rushmore. Now, Sorkin writes with a level of sophistication that I think a lot of readers or viewers of his product, since he primarily writes for the stage and the screen, can get a little lost. Did the details of the political deals that might be going on behind the scenes in the Bartlett White House, did those details really matter? Or did the motivation for those details matter? In fact, speaking of Sorkin, I remember he shared in an interview one time that his approach to storytelling is super simple. You put a character in a scene, you set him with an obstacle in front of him, and he has to figure out a way to get around that obstacle. Never dumb down your writing. Never dumb down your storytelling because you think the readers might not understand. Thank you so much for watching this video here today. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, there's a little button down kind of around where I'm pointing. Click it, subscribe, and click the notification bell because you're going to get more content just like this coming from this channel here very soon. These are 5 steps. I could have given you 55 steps where you can improve your writing, kind of infuse it with a little bit more of, hey, I want to write like an editor.